Ever come across a podcast that sounds almost too perfect? You know, like the host doesn't miss a beat, always with the perfect, insightful commentary. And their voice, smooth as butter. Well, get this. Google's new AI tool, NotebookLM, can create podcasts that sound shockingly real.
Yeah, it's really blurring the lines, isn't it? Between like what we think of as human creativity and artificial intelligence. It's not just stringing words together. We're talking about a tool that can actually take a whole bunch of different sources, like a stack of research papers, and synthesize that information, pull out the key points, and turn it into a podcast.
It's wild. This NotebookLM is like having a super-powered research assistant who also happens to be a podcaster.
Exactly.
And speaking of research, the Decrypt article we're diving into today really puts this tool to the test. They gave NotebookLM a bunch of info on a Donald Trump interview. And the AI, get this, spits out this incredibly detailed podcast. And here's the kicker. It even makes connections that the team at Decrypt hadn't even thought of.
It's really amazing the level of analysis that it's capable of. Like, imagine you're working on a project, right? And you've got all this research, you've got articles bookmarked, PDFs everywhere, maybe even a Google Slides presentation or two.
Oh, and don't forget those voice memos we all have.
Exactly. So you feed all of that, which, by the way, it can handle a ton of info, like over 50 sources.
Wait, seriously? 50 different things?
50. And unlike some AI tools that get tripped up by, if you don't say things exactly the right way or use the exact keywords, NotebookLM actually understands the context.
Yeah.
It delves into the meaning behind the words.
So it's not just matching keywords, it's actually like understanding the nuances of what you've given it.
Exactly.
That is wild.
Recognizing patterns, identifying those key themes, and then weaving it all together into a coherent narrative.
So less like a basic Google search.
Yeah.
And more like having an actual research assistant who can not only read everything, but actually understands it.
Yes.
That's next level. And then, get this, you tell it to make a podcast.
I know, right?
And you can even have a little chat with the AI beforehand to make sure, like, hey, you're focusing on the right things, right? We're going to hit these key points.
Yeah, it's that interactive element that makes it so powerful, right? You're not just getting a pre-programmed response. You're actually shaping how the AI analyzes the information to fit your specific needs.
So it's like having a personal podcast producer, minus the coffee runs. I can get used to that. But before we all run off and quit our jobs and become AI podcast moguls, there's a catch. The Decrypt article mentioned that, at least for now, it can only create podcasts that are up to 10 minutes long.
Right, and only in English, which, when you think about it, is kind of telling, don't you think?
Oh, how so?
Well, why those specific limitations? It suggests that even with how impressive this is, there are still some pretty big hurdles when it comes to longer form content and dealing with, all the nuances of different languages.
So it's a little peek behind the curtain of AI's capabilities. Like, it's not sentient or anything, at least not yet.
Right.
But still, creating a 10-minute podcast from a pile of information is still pretty impressive. So Google's AI can whip up a podcast intro, no problem. But what happens when this tech really takes off? Are we talking about like a golden age of information sharing or...
Your robot uprising.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe not quite.
Right.
But, the Decrypt article did bring up some pretty interesting possibilities.
Yeah, definitely.
Like using AI-generated podcasts for personalized learning.
Imagine this, right? You're struggling with a really complicated topic, say for an exam.
Oh, please tell me you're not suggesting we unleash AI on our already terrifying course syllabuses.
Okay, but hear me out. Instead of spending hours staring at textbooks, right, or getting lost in a sea of online articles, you could feed NotebookLM all of your notes, maybe even those frantic scribbles you make in the margins of your notebook.
Oh, okay.
Your lecture recordings.
So I'm picturing like my sleep-deprived notes transformed into this super coherent podcast. I've got to admit, I'm a little intrigued.
And it gets even better. The AI could synthesize all of that information, pick out those key points, maybe even like throw in some real-world examples to make it stick.
Wow.
It's like having a personal tutor break down even the most confusing topics into something you can easily listen to and understand.
That's actually pretty amazing, especially for people who learn best by listening. But, okay, let's address the elephant in the room. What about the potential for misuse? If AI can create podcasts that sound this real, what's stopping someone from, say, faking an interview? Or even worse, spreading misinformation?
Yeah, it's a valid concern for sure. And it really underscores why it's more important than ever to, be really careful about the information we consume online.
Right.
Just because it sounds official or convincing doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
So double-checking sources, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And this is where, critical listening skills really come into play. We need to be able to evaluate information for ourselves.
Yeah.
Identify potential biases, think critically about the messages that are being presented.
Whether it's a human or an AI behind the mic.
Exactly.
So it's like that saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me with a perfectly narrated AI podcast, shame on me.
Exactly. We can't let our guard down just because it sounds nice. We have to be savvy consumers of information, especially now that things are getting more and more blurry.
Right, so education and awareness are key. But what about the people who actually make podcasts? The Decrypt article touched on this idea of AI potentially, like taking jumps in the audio industry.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic, but an important one to discuss. If AI can create this level of quality, much faster and cheaper,
Right.
it's going to have a big impact on how podcasts are produced.
So are we all doomed? Are the robots going to take over all the podcasting jobs?
I don't think it's necessarily about robots replacing humans completely. It's more about a shift. Some tasks like editing, maybe even the voiceover work might become automated, but that frees up human creators to focus on, the bigger picture stuff like storytelling, developing unique formats, or even just connecting with their audience on a deeper level.
So maybe instead of being afraid of the robots, it's about learning how to work with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about seeing AI as a tool to enhance what we do, not something that's going to take over completely. After all, technology should empower us, right? Not replace human creativity entirely.
It's like we're standing at this crossroads, right?
Yeah.
AI podcasts could be amazing. Like imagine a world with personalized learning for everyone.
Yeah.
But also we have to think about what happens when we can't tell if we're listening to a real person or a really smart machine.
Right. It's a lot to consider. It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement or even the anxiety about it all.
Totally.
But at the end of the day, this technology is going to impact how everyone experiences audio. So how do we navigate this new world of AI-generated content? What do we do?
Right. Because like we've been talking about, there's huge potential, but also some real concerns. So for the average listener, where do we even begin?
Well, for starters, it's good to remember that just because a podcast sounds super polished and professional doesn't mean it's giving you the full picture.
Yeah.
We have to be really careful about what we believe.
Oh, absolutely.
And a big part of that is being aware of our own biases.
So before I hit play on the next episode of my new favorite true crime podcast, I should probably ask myself, am I just looking for information that backs up what I already think is true?
Exactly. It's easy to get caught in those echo chambers, right? So it's about actively looking for different perspectives.
Right.
And challenging our own assumptions. Don't be afraid to, do a little digging. Just because it's a smooth talking AI doesn't mean you can skip the fact checking.
So trust but verify still applies in the age of AI.
Now more than ever. And honestly, it's probably only going to get more complicated as AI gets even better at creating realistic audio.
Oh, for sure.
Which is why it's so important to, boost our media literacy skills. We need to be able to listen critically to everything we hear online.
Like we're all digital detectives looking for those clues.
Exactly. But it's not just about individual responsibility, right? I mean, this is something we need to be talking about as a society.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
What kind of safeguards can we put in place to prevent things from going off the rails?
Right.
How do we ensure transparency and accountability when AI is creating more and more of the content we consume?
It's a big conversation, but a really important one. Because the future of audio is being shaped right now as we speak.
It really is.
And we all have a part to play in making sure it's a future we can all feel good about.
Well said. And on that note, we'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah.
Have you come across any AI-generated podcasts? What are you excited about? What makes you nervous?
Let us know. You can find us on all the usual social media spots.
And hey, if you're feeling brave, why not give Google's NotebookLM a try yourself? See what it comes up with. But, bring your critical thinking hats.
Always. Just a reminder to listen carefully out there, everyone. Until next time.